Hello, and welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto, attorney at law in the state of Michigan, where I've been practicing law for 25 years in the fields of consumer protection and lemon law. I often write about this stuff at places like roadandtrack.com, and I've written a few books along the way. I often tell people they can call my office with questions or comments, and I get questions or comments flying at me from all directions, from all around the country. And I have to tell you that one of the things that worries me in the last few years is how often people get burned by buying cars from far away. So beware of used cars from far away. I'm often talking about from out of state, but they could just be from the other end of your state. Distance causes problems, and these are more modern problems than anything else. So we'll talk about this. The example I'll give you is a gentleman called me and he said, Steve, I bought a car from Michigan, so I'm hoping you can help me, but I'm from another state about, 2,000 miles away. And I found this vehicle on the internet, and I talked to the gentleman over the phone. He told me all kinds of nice things about the car. We haggled on a price. I saw photographs of the car. And I then flew to your fair state of Michigan, where I looked at the vehicle, test drove it, and decided to buy it. I then hopped in the car and decided then to have a long road trip home. Now, I can tell you, I've done that drive 4 or 5 times. But I don't know if I'd trust doing it in a used car I just bought. And as you might imagine with this story, the used car died along the way. And the guy called me, and he'd gotten home. But when he called me, he said, my car's not here with me. My car is in a middle state. It died. And so now I'm home. My car is, in Wyoming or Utah or someplace like that. And, of course, the guy who sold me the car is in Michigan. I think he lied to me. And what can I do about this? And so I said, well, what you're describing here is like an amalgam combination of 2 or 3 things I often talk about. So I thought I'd combine them all and talk about them right now. And I'll tell you what I told him, but I'll also talk in more general terms so you can use this information to help yourself. First of all, you have to understand that this was not a common thing back in the 60s and 70s for you youngsters out there who don't know what the 60s and 70s were other than from television. But in the old days, you used to advertise a car for sale in like a newspaper. Again, go look it up. And there was a thing called the Trading Times in Michigan and the Detroit News Sunday Classifieds and things like that. And you'd look at a newspaper ad and you'd see somebody describing a car in 2 or 3 sentences. Smaller, and I'm not kidding you, shorter than a tweet. It would often have abbreviations and say things like, 70 Dodge Charger, 383, 2 BBL, 60K actual, and then a phone number. And you'd know what all that meant. That's the year and the engine size, how many miles are on it, and so on. Or it might have a price sometimes. And you look at the phone number, I'm not making this up, you look at the phone number, and by looking at the exchange number, not the area code, but the exchange, the next 3 numbers, you'd know where the car was if it wasn't listed in the ad. So the question is, are you going to drive to, Southfield to look at a car? That's one thing. Will you go look at a car in River Rouge, or would you go to, someplace downriver and look at a car? And you may or may not. And we used to actually think about this. Like I lived in Oakland County. I might not drive to Wayne County to go look at a car. I mean, that's a hike. Well, that's all out the window now with the internet. Okay, and as anybody knows, as everyone should know, if you're looking for a car, you can find a car on the internet. But the problem is the internet makes it easy to find cars, even the ones that are far away. So you go onto eBay, and I'll give eBay as the example, but there's other car selling sites out there like Craigslist, where you can look up cars by make and model, location, price, whatever it is. And what happens is you go to look for a car, and say you're looking for a 2002 Ford Explorer. Okay, I've done that search a few times myself. And the first thing you do is you tell it, here's my zip code, find me cars within 25 miles. And you go and look at the cars that are there, and then you go, wait a second. What about 50 miles? You bump the search pattern out a little bit. You find some more cars. And just because you're just window shopping, you're just looking, you don't have to buy the cars you look at. You bump it out and you just say 100 or unlimited. Show me every car in America. And what happens is, it will happen. You're going to find the car you love right outside your comfort zone. Whatever the number was that you passed over a minute earlier is your comfort zone. And the car that you want to buy is in another state. Now, here's the thing. If the car's local, you go look at it and make a decision. If the car's 100 miles away, You might go look at it and make a decision, but suddenly you start factoring in these costs and expenses of going to look at the car. And I've spoken to many people who've actually said that they looked at a car on the internet, they looked at photographs, they spoke to somebody, and they decided to fly there and buy the car. And if I was selling a car and a guy agreed to fly in from out of state to buy it, I'd be like, oh yes, rub my hands together like a comic book villain. Because if someone's investing in the plane ticket to get out there and they bought a one-way ticket, they're buying the car. So it doesn't matter what you tell them to get them out there. And one of the biggest problems with all of this is that you basically committed yourself to buying the car. Don't get me wrong. If you wanted to, you could decide to not buy the car. But most people are, in essence, committing to buy the car when they buy the plane ticket to go look, to go get the car. And they haven't inspected the car yet. And I've always, as you know, preached about this. You don't buy a car without an inspection. Well, you shouldn't commit to buying a car without an inspection either, right? I mean, that's the same thing. So you haven't inspected the car yet. And I've had so many people say, they say, Steve, the guy inspected the car and he told me. Well, no, he's selling you the car. His interests are opposite of yours. He's trying to get as much money from you as possible, and you want to pay him as little as possible. He's trying to sell you a car, you're trying to buy a car. Those are not the same thing, okay? He's trying to unload something, you're trying to get something. I know everyone thinks that that's the same thing. It's not. So you have to get your own inspection done. Now, you can actually hire someone local and have them go over and inspect it. But I almost never hear about that. Almost no one ever says, by the way, Steve, I was looking at a vehicle on the internet. I was tempted to go buy it, so I hired a local independent inspector to go over and look at the car. I never get that phone call because either they did it and it worked or no one does it. I don't know which it is. But if you've hired an independent local inspector and had good luck, please contact me. Let me know. I'd love to talk about it. So the first thing is, how do you get the inspection, okay? But then the second problem, of course, is you got to go get the car, which is possibly travel, get there, fly there, so on and so forth. But the biggest problem, believe it or not, in my mind, of buying a car in another state, and perhaps this is because I'm an attorney, and there's an old saying that goes, if you have a hammer in your hands, the world looks like a nail, okay? So to an attorney, everything looks like a legal problem, I suppose. But I get these phone calls from people who bought vehicles from other states, and they're confused because the laws are not the same in all 50 states. And I've mentioned some of these before on podcasts, some of them I've not. But I've spoken to someone who called me because they said, Steve, you're an attorney in Michigan. I just bought a car in Michigan. I got ripped off. And I go, what happened? And they tell me the story. And I say, well, did you buy it with a warranty or as is? And they go, well, I bought it as is, but, and they start explaining to me why, where they come from, that wouldn't mean anything. And I say, well, in Michigan, as is means as is. You bought it with all faults. And they say, yeah, but the guy told me. And I said, no. It doesn't matter what the guy told you. For the most part, as is means you're buying it with all faults. I've had people who've lived in states that don't allow as is sales come to Michigan and buy a car as is, bring it back to their state, and then say, if I'd bought it here, I'd be protected. And I say, I know. That's why you should have bought it there. But you couldn't because it wasn't for sale there. It was for sale here. So as is a great example of that. But there's a lot of other problems. And another one is inspections. Michigan does not require vehicles be inspected for any reason at all. So if you can walk into the Secretary of State's office with a title and say, I own this car. Here's a proof of insurance for this car. Can I buy plates? They will sell you plates. And I've had this discussion with many people. I had an M35 deuce and a half Army truck that weighed 13,000 pounds. I walked into the Secretary of State's office not sure if I could plate such a thing because it's a monster. If you've ever seen one on the road, it frightens children. It's giant. It's huge. And I walked into the Secretary of State's office and I had a title that said it weighed 13,000 pounds and it was a truck. And I walked up with a proof of insurance and a title. And I said, I want plates. And the woman said, sure. Cut us a check. Boom, you're good to go. I got a license plate just for a truck because apparently the cutoff before your truck became something else was 13,500 pounds or something like that. I could be wrong in the numbers, but it's close. The point is that they didn't come out and look at my truck. They don't care. The title says truck. So in Michigan, we don't inspect vehicles. We literally say, oh, you've got a title, you got insurance? Boom, there you go, pay for a plate. So I've had people tell me, they say, Steve, I live in a state with inspections. A lot of these are back east. And I bought a car off the internet And I've spoken to people who had cars shipped. They didn't even go look at the car. They just said, yeah, ship it to me. I'll pay for shipping. They buy the car. It gets shipped to them. It gets offloaded. And they're walking around and they go, this thing's not going to pass inspection. And I don't know what it takes to pass inspections in different states, but I know there's things they look at, like, is the car safe and sound and so on. And I had a guy call me once and he goes, Steve, he goes, this car wouldn't pass inspection from like 100 yards away. Like what do I do now? And I said, did the seller in Michigan promise you it would pass an inspection? He said, no. I said, did you ask? He said, no. And I go, why not? He goes, I just assumed it would. I go, why would you assume that your car that you're buying from Michigan will pass an inspection in your home state when you haven't even mentioned to the seller that you're concerned about this and you haven't conveyed to him what the inspection entails in your state? Because quite frankly, and I've been doing lemon law in Michigan for 25 years now, I've spoken to car owners, buyers, sellers, you name it, pretty much in all 50 states, okay? And when people call me up, they say, Steve, I have a question for you. And I say, well, what state are you in? They say, I'm in Ohio, or I'm in Utah, or whatever. I say, I can't help you because I'm not licensed in that state. I can't give you legal advice in that state. I'm only licensed in Michigan. And they say, well, can't you give me some general advice? And I say, well, I can tell you extremely general things, but you're still going to have to consult the local attorney because the law is different in each state. And they say, well, but you must know enough to know what the law is in Utah or Illinois or Missouri. No, I don't. I mean, I have a hard enough time remembering everything I need to know about Michigan. I can't remember the stuff that I've picked up along the way by way of trivia in the other 49 states, Puerto Rico and Guam, okay? So I know the law in Michigan. I have no clue what it is in other states. I know generalities. I know that some states don't allow as is. I know some states have inspections, things of that nature. But if you're buying a car and you're in a state that requires a car to pass an inspection, and you're going to buy a car from another state, you should ask the seller, by the way, I'm in a state that has inspections. What are the odds that thing's going to pass the inspection? And if the person actually is willing to go out on the limb and say, this thing will pass an inspection, have them put it on the purchase agreement. Have them agree to that. Have them make it part of the contract so that you can bind them to that. Because if they say, I don't know, we don't have inspections here, that's what you're going to get stuck with. So the inspection is one of the things, and I'm talking about the inspection that takes place in another state to get your car on the road, is something we don't even have in Michigan. So the law might be so different in the state you're buying your car from, you don't know, okay? And one of the other things that pops up, it has to do with titling, okay? Michigan, you get a green title if a car has got a good, clean title, green title. And there's not a lot of branding going on in Michigan with respect to titles, but a title can be branded as, say, rebuilt salvage. And I've talked about this before too. A vehicle gets severely damaged and an insurance company takes ownership of it and then sells it at auction saying the car cannot be fixed. They will sell the vehicle as salvage, saying the vehicle's been wrecked and it is no longer drivable and most likely is only good to be torn apart for parts. But there is a methodology in which a person can go and buy a salvage vehicle and they can bring it back to their shop and they can replace the messed up parts on it with unmessed up parts, make it a complete car, and then have the car inspected by the state, and the state will then, if it passes inspection, give you a rebuilt salvage title. So I've had people tell me, they say, Steve, I bought a car from Michigan, and the guy told me it was rebuilt salvage, but he explained to me what the problems were with it before it was damaged, or what caused it to become salvage. And he repaired those 2 or 3 items, and now it's rebuilt salvage. I bought the car, I got a great deal on it, and of course now the car's going down the road sideways. Turns out it's got no airbags, nothing on it works. I've been ripped off. And I say, okay, you've been ripped off, but I can't help you. And they say, well, no, the guy told me it was rebuilt salvage. And I say, well, what does the title say? And the title says rebuilt salvage. I say, okay, well, he's telling you the truth then. It is titled rebuilt salvage. And they say, yeah, but the car is messed up. And I say, rebuilt salvage does not mean the car is not messed up. That's not what it means. Rebuilt salvage literally just means that an inspector from the state looked at the vehicle and confirmed it was complete and the pieces that had been replaced on it were not stolen. That's it. The inspection is done to prevent chop shops from using stolen parts to rebuild bent up cars. That's it. It's not designed to protect future buyers of this car. And I've spoken to a lot of people, and this is an area of much debate, as they say. on the internet because there's a couple guys, including the guy over at Jalopnik, who spends a lot of time, and he buys rebuilt salvage vehicles, and he often does it knowing what he's getting into, and he gets great deals on them, and he just learns to live with the problems that cars might have. And I've said before, if you know what you're getting yourself into, you can buy a rebuilt salvage vehicle, and it might work out well for you. Just keep in mind that it comes with baggage. For instance, when you go to sell the car, you have to explain it's rebuilt salvage, and someone else might not be comfortable with that. Number two, your insurance company might not want to give you good insurance on it. They might insure it, but they might not give you good insurance. Or you might want to ask before you buy it. And some banks are loath to lend money on a rebuilt salvage vehicle. So if you're out car shopping and you've got a pre-approved loan, a rebuilt salvage might not be something you can purchase. So you have to be aware that that's different from state to state. I've heard people tell me in other states, rebuilt salvage literally means the car is safe to drive. I don't know, but that's not what it means in Michigan. So if you're going to buy a rebuilt salvage vehicle in Michigan, be aware of the fact the car might not even be safe to drive. It is simply complete. It's got all its parts. The person who signed off on it and said that it gets that title did not even drive the vehicle. A test drive is not part of the inspection to get a rebuilt salvage title. And the final thing I got to point out to you is that some states have different rules on odometers. So some states track odometer mileage very, very carefully. Some states stop at 10 years. When a vehicle gets 10 years old, they just say, oh, it's over 10 years old. Who cares? And so it's possible for a vehicle to go from one state to another, and as it hopscotches around the country, it can gain and lose some of the protections in one state that it had in another state. And so don't assume that a vehicle you're looking at far away is the same as looking at a car locally, because your default position in your mind is to assume that the laws are the same everywhere, and they're not. The laws might be radically different in another state. And I'll give you a great example. Wisconsin, for instance, has got different levels of a salvage vehicle than many other states do. So I know that a lot of guys go into Wisconsin and buy the vehicles with the slightly lower value salvage designation, bring it into another state that doesn't have that, simply retitling it, and they lose that salvage designation. I've seen the title histories where that happened, where nothing was done to the car and it got better somehow. Okay? So when you're shopping around for cars, especially in other states, remember that everything is not the same as it is where you live. So that is why you need to beware of used cars from far away. Questions or comments, as always, shoot them my way, lehtoslaw.com, LEHTOSLAW.com. I'm on Twitter. Send me notes, sign up, follow me, whatever it takes, at Steve Lehto, STEVELEHTO. And this show is on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Podbean, Google Play, and YouTube. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye-bye.